This video is going to cover a part of section 4.3 regarding right triangles and the target using right triangle trigonometry. More specifically, this video is going to cover the three other trig functions that exist. The three other trig functions that exist are called cosecant, that's denoted by CSC, secant is abbreviated with SEC, and then cotangent is COT. And so you guys know, in terms of a right triangle and opposite, hypotenuse, and adjacent, that sine is the opposite over hypotenuse, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, and tangent is opposite over adjacent. Now, I forgot to tell you, you guys should be on the third page of your notes. We started filling in these notes the other day or last week, but we're adding a little bit more to it. This is section 4.3, so the third page in your note packet. So I'm going to show you what cosecant, secant, and cotangent are in terms of this right triangle, and then I want to see if you can come up with how these three trig functions are related to the three previous trig functions that you learned. So cosecant is hypotenuse over opposite, secant is hypotenuse over adjacent, and cotangent equals adjacent over opposite. So how are these trig functions related to one another? How is sine and cosecant related? How is cosine and secant related? And then how is tangent and cotangent related? And so what do we call it when we flip a fraction like that? And the relationship between them is that they are called reciprocals. So these are the three reciprocal functions to sine, cosine, and tangent. So if you turn your note page, we did this last week. We had this 3, 4, 5 triangle, and we just found the sine, cosine, and tangent of theta. And so using this triangle, I want you to find the cosecant of theta if cosecant is the reciprocal of sine. I want you to find the secant of theta if secant is the reciprocal of cosine, and then find the cotangent of theta if cotangent is the reciprocal of tangent. So go ahead and pause the video and then come back and check your answers. So cosecant is the reciprocal of sine, so that would mean that the cosecant of theta is 5/3, the hypotenuse over opposite. Secant is a reciprocal of cosine, so this would be 5/4, or the adjacent over hypotenuse. Sorry, hypotenuse over adjacent. And then cotangent is the reciprocal of tangent, so adjacent over opposite, and you end up with 4/3, 4/3. Using your calculator. So how do we use our calculator if we have a if we have a cosecant or a secant or a cotangent function? So last week we did the ones with sine, cosine, and tangent. One thing you always want to make sure you do is check your mode. Are you in degree mode or radian mode? And so specifically with this first example, we had the sine of 53 degrees. Well, I knew I needed to be in degree mode because this was denoted with the little degree symbol. And so then I would just type that into my calculator. But what if I had cosecant of 53 degrees? Well, cosecant is the reciprocal, and I'm not going to use the second button. The inverse of sine and the reciprocal of sine are two completely different things. So I'm going to show you just my illustration here that it's going to be the sine of 53 to the negative first power. Now that little negative first power, you can see that on your calculator as the x to the -1 button that's underneath the math button on your calculator. So you can do this in one of two ways. You could either type sine of 53 degrees and then hit the x to the -1 button, and that would give you your answer. Or you could do 1 divided by the sine of 53 degrees. Both of these will give you the same answer. Just make sure you are not hitting the second button. This is not solving for an angle. We're not using the inverse. Even though the reciprocal is denoted by that -1 power, just like the inverse is when we hit the second button, but it's in a different place. You'll notice that it's after the sine of 53 degrees, not right after the sine. So just to make sure, this is the reciprocal, not the inverse, so don't hit the second button. So once again, you got to check your mode. Well, we didn't do this last time because we hadn't gotten to radians. So if you change your calculator mode to radians right now and type in cosine of pi over 8, you should get 0.924. Well, if I want to find the secant of pi over 8, you can either find the cosine of pi over 8 and then hit the x to the -1 button, or you could do 1 divided by cosine of pi over 8, and you should get 1.082. And the other example I have, once again, we're going to change this back to degree mode because we're asking for the tangent of 112 degrees. You should get -2.475. But if I'm wondering what the cotangent of 112 degrees is, I need to first find the tangent of 112 and then hit the x to the negative 1 button, or the reciprocal, or you could type in 1 divided by tangent of 112 and you should get negative 0.404. And then lastly, how to solve for an angle if you are given a secant or a cosecant. So let me just cover up what I had there. How to solve for an angle. If you were just given sine, cosine, and tangent, what we did last week was just you hit the second button. That is the inverse button. So notice where the negative 1 power is. So if I had sine of theta equals 0.75, then I would hit second sine of 0.75, and I got 48.6 degrees. But now if you are given a secant, cosecant, or a cotangent, you need to take the reciprocal of both sides first, then use the inverse button. So what I mean by that is if I have secant of theta equals 3/2, I'm first going to change that to a cosine and then take the reciprocal of the right side as well. So that means the cosine of theta equals 2/3. Well, now I can use my calculator just by hitting the second button. And then now you have to pay attention to, do we want your answer in degrees or radians? Well, if you're in the degree mode, you should get 48.2. If you're in radian mode, you should get 0.841 radians. So we will let you know what mode to be in. If it's for a triangle, you need to be in degree mode. When we get to graphing cosine functions, you should be in radian mode. So this video covered the last 3 trig functions, secant, cosecant, and cotangent.